So Philip K. Dick had this theory that time was an illusion and that we were all actually in 50 AD. And the reason he had written this book was that he had somehow momentarily punctured through this illusion, this veil of time, and what he had seen there was what was going on in the book of Acts. And he was really into Gnosticism and this idea that this demiurge or demon had created this illusion of time to make us forget, that Christ was about to return and the kingdom of God was about to arrive. And that we're all in 50 AD, and there's someone trying to make us forget, that, God is imminent. And that's what time is. That's what all of history is. It's just kind of this continuous, daydream or distraction. Now, Philip K. Dick is right about time, but he's wrong that it's 50 AD. Actually, there's only one instant, and it's right now, and it's eternity. And it's an instant in which God is posing a question. And that question is basically, do you want to, be one with eternity? Do you want to be in heaven? And we're all saying, no, thank you, not just yet. And so time is actually just this constant saying no to God's invitation. I mean, that's what time is. And it's no more 50 AD than it's 2001. There's just this one instant, and that's what we're always in.
One moment in time, as I keep saying, with a shifting hologram that keeps us away from saying yes to divinity. The demiurge created a hologram, and now we're trapped in it. And it's so obvious this year as Yaldi openly devours our awareness like baby Yoda eating alien frog eggs. While the simulation breaks down even more and the mind killer fear envelops the globe. And it's going to continue beyond the holidays, my beloved truth seekers. The apocalypse isn't interested in your calendars, as fundagelicals have been saying for centuries. It's not. Let go of numerology or astrology because this is beyond cosmic. A dark archetype descending upon the desert of the real.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
The only escape is to say yes to divinity, and that requires us to go inward. Embrace that divine madness Plato, the Hermetics, and the Gnostics taught, and unleash our inner Prometheus and indwelling warrior Athena. This may not be the best time to be alive, but it's the best time to be awake. And eternity hasn't gone anywhere. It's there for your taking, and it's more visible to us freaks and outcasts. We who have lived with divine madness since the day we were born. It's there.
Junkies and masochists and hookers and those who have squandered everything are the ring of brightest angels around heaven.
The way out is way out, and we always need that reminder of divine madness. We'll be talking about the Gnosis of Philip K. Dick. We'll add 2 heavy doses of Robert Anton Wilson and other lords of high weirdness, as well as cover the topics of psychedelics, Eastern mysticism, pharmaceuticals, cyberpunk, runaway technology, tyranny, and more.
But I don't want to go among mad people.
For all of this, we have the honor of being joined at the virtual Alexandria by Jack Hart, who will be discussing his 3 Tek Gnostics books. Incredible reads that provide so many tools to say yes to divinity, as you will see. And yes,
this is blasphemy! This is madness!
Aeon by Gnostic Radio, an initiation by conversation into the dark corners of myth, magic, and meaning. A crash course in cult culture and conspiracy. A virtuous virus invoking and informing history, holiness, and heresy. Each week I, your host Miguel Connor, commandeers your connection to bring you the most accepted and rejected scholars and provocateurs to your attention. Fun, compelling, and deeply weird, this is the blow-your-mind cocktail party conversation you always wanted to listen in on. And you deserve to be here, for you are a shining crazy diamond that sees the divine invasion of Emmanuel Philip K. Dick wrote about, and embrace your divine madness. You're not like the meat sacks cowering in their homes and behind the promises of oligarchs.
Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
As Dick himself wrote in The Divine Invasion, what a tragic world this is. Those down here are prisoners. And the ultimate tragedy is that they don't know it. They think they are free because they never have been free and do not understand what it means. This is a prison and few men have guessed. But I know, Emmanuel said to himself, because that is why I am here. To burn the walls, to tear down the metal gates, to break each chain.
Those without swords can still die upon them. I fear neither death nor pain.
What do you fear, my lady?
A cage.
Ready to break chains and tear down walls and finally say yes to divinity? Sure, it seems Dick's prophetic and Gnostic warning never included pandemics. Although he spoke about the holy virus that was the plasmate, which took the shape of the Nag Hammadi library. But as Chris Knowles said, Dick knew better than anyone the game the archons play. And today they are indeed laying all their satanic, build back better cards on the effing table. As Terry Gilliam once said, for everyone lost in the endlessly multiplicating realities of the modern world, remember, Philip K. Dick got there first.
Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Human beings are the only animal that forms ideas about their world. We perceive it, not through our bodies, but through our minds. We must agree on what is real. Because of this, we are the only animal on Earth that goes mad.
Dick got there first, and he is just one member of the Aeon Byte pantheon, providing those red pill suppositories that crack real nice in the outer rectums of reality. I know it's been hard, but we're only getting started. As Hunter S. Thompson said, when the going gets tough, the weird turn professional.
Do you know what crazy is? Crazy is majority rules. Yeah,
And as Dick wrote too, the true measure of man is not his intelligence or how high he rises in this freak establishment. No, the true measure of a man is this. How quickly can he respond to the needs of others and how much of himself he can give.
The third principle of sentient life is its capacity for self-sacrifice, for a cause, a loved one, or for a friend.
Yes, I know it's hard right now, but you can overcome, even as depression might have invaded your psyche. As Rachel Connerly told me in an email, depression and addiction are our ego's way to assuage the different complexes, many of those egregores created by that wickedness in high places. This may lead to dark and even suicidal thoughts. But the suicide impulse comes from a knowing that something has to die. It's not the physical body, though. It's your ego's worldview that must go, your ego's limited understanding, often programmed too by archons. The ego's unwillingness to be on the soul-building journey at all costs is painful beyond belief. When we remove that, then we don't need suicide or even depression.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
In other words, kill your worldview and you will be resurrected. You will be free from the hologram and going into a soul-building adventure all the way to eternity. This is the best time to kill your worldview because it's obvious that sensible reality, the old ways, and all cultural chimeras are falling apart. The world is obviously false, and so is your worldview. Kill it.
That life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but life finds a way.
Your life is yours to create.
You have so much potential, and you are amazing, and you are so beautiful. All you need to do is inspire and be inspired, and fuck all the heroes and villains and saviors. You are the final authority, have always been. You are the true sons and daughters of Hermes, the god of thieves, and Sophia, the goddess of smugglers. As Christopher Morley said, there are no presidents. You are the first you that ever was.
Get busy living or get busy dying. That's goddamn right.
As a bonus, so you see Dick's full Gnosis, I will include part of our interview with Eric Davis from a couple of years ago on his book, High Weirdness, where he speaks about Dick's divine madness and prophetic genius. You'll love it.
Once a boy grows up, he projects his paranoia on the whole world.
Let us end with a quote from Principia Discordia that describes who we are, unhinged from the hologram, eternal forever. Magicians, especially since the Gnostic and the Kabbalah influences, have sought higher consciousness through the assimilation and control of universal opposites. Good/evil, positive/negative, male/female, etc. But due to the steadfast pomposity of ritualism inherited from the ancient methods of the shaman, occultists have been blinded to what is perhaps the two most important pairs of apparent or earth plane opposites: order/disorder and serious/humorous. Magicians and their progeny, the scientists, have always taken themselves and their subject in an orderly and sober manner, thereby disregarding an essential metaphysical balance. When magicians learn to approach philosophy as a malleable art instead of an immutable truth, and learn to appreciate the absurdity of man's endeavors, then they will be able to pursue their art with a lighter heart, and perhaps gain a clearer understanding of it, and therefore gain a more effective magic. Led us to our interview with Jack Hart on Technosticks. Write your own gospel, live your own myth.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way hearing the same words, saying the same words, I submit that these impressions are valid and significant. And I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off. What was that? Everybody says, what was what? You say, that beam of light, all those colors and lighted sections of different colors. And they say, I didn't see anything. You say, well, that's not part of the movie. And then you realize this is all a movie to which we obligingly add space and time.
This is the AM Byte interview, and with us we have the pleasure of being joined by Jack Hart to discuss what I call the Tek Gnostics Trilogy. These include the books, the Tek Gnostics Heresies, the Tek Gnostics Codex, and Applied Technostics, a field guide for the collective conscious. Jack, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be here, Miguel. I'm a big fan of your show, so it's a thrill for me.
Well, I really enjoyed your books because your work is certainly red meat or manna from heaven when it comes to our audience. You hit all the sweet spots that us modern heretics like. So it's going to be a great conversation. And with us, too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm just fine, sitting here in my reality tunnel, being bathed by pink beams.
Well, that's good. Yeah, life is good. And we're definitely going to cover the figures behind those two quotes. But first of all, Jack, let's talk about you and how you came to be who you are and how you came to write these books. You've always been a seeker, right?
Absolutely. You know, I was raised out here on America's West Coast, and grew up here in the West, in the Wild West. Was a kind of a product of, the youth culture on the West Coast, really from my early days. Witnessing the countercultural '60s revolution, through that whole outgrowth of the human potential movement that kind of came out of that time, through the rise of Silicon Valley and the whole personal computer revolution, and its cyberpunk mutation, right up to the high weirdness of our present day.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm sure you must look back and said, what is going on with culture? It must be pretty hard to map out from the 60s to now. I mean, do you ever look and just say, man, I can't figure this out. This must be some sort of crazy simulation we're in.
Yeah, well, the truth typically is far stranger than any fiction. So,
yeah, that is true. It is very true. And why did you decide to write these books, and why 3 separate books?
Well, I'll tell you, specific to Gnosticism, strangely enough, again, being a product here on the West Coast in decades past, I was led to Gnosticism and more specifically my interpretation of Tek Gnosticism through participating in the great postmodern mystery cult known to many people as the Grateful Dead. So I was indoctrinated into the mysteries, in the late 70s, but it wasn't until Jerry and Mickey, those are dead connoisseurs would recognize those two names. But it wasn't until Jerry and Mickey did a symposium during one set of shows that I was at in the Bay Area. They did a symposium with Joseph Campbell called Ritual and Rapture, from Dionysus to the Grateful Dead.
Wow.
And it was like a mind blower. And, during that run of shows, that was back in '86, I think. And it was then that I really began to fully grasp the deep significance of what the Dead were really up to. Through the Afro diaspora that was rock and roll, the Dead were tapping into unbroken chain, no pun intended, reaching back to Gnostic thought and the Dionysian mysteries. And I would note that Joe Campbell went to those shows that I was at, and apparently he was quite taken by the ambiance of the Dead scene, and so it turns out that Joe and I were at the same shows together, which it's kind of cool.
That is cool, and yes, the Dionysian mysteries, especially when you go through the cult of Orpheus, was very Gnostic. Certainly influenced the classical Gnostics, and the Grateful Dead. I never saw them, but it's from what I hear, it's a shamanistic ritual.
Well, cults of the dead, Miguel.
Yeah. The world, everybody's dead according to the Gnostics. There's just a few who need to wake up to live and not taste that death, that ignorance. And have you heard any research? And I'm asking you this because it's in my head. I'm reading this book about Hollywood, and it's exposing, of course, the dark underbelly of Hollywood and the West Coast. And of course, we all know the occult, the CIA, mafia, for some reason, all just crashed into the West Coast for a long time and is still in there. And I'm reading one part and it's going, okay, next we're going to talk about Leonard Cohen. And I'm like, oh, come on. Are there no sacred, can I have no heroes in this world? And I'm like, no, I really can't. I haven't had the courage to get to that part, but I'm going to have to get to that part. So asking you, have you heard of the research that claims that the Grateful Dead were CIA ops or anything like that?
Like a lot of elements of consequence, in our near past, such as the psychedelic revolution. The nefarious CIA always seem to poke their noses into it, and those rumors are out there. I've always had a sense that despite the intent, even if such thoughts were of CIA origin, it's a phenomena that just got away from them and went feral, into the culture. And so consequently, I think that facets move in mysterious ways, and they don't play out the way those who sought to control them ever anticipated.
Yeah, that's definitely a good answer. And as I've said before, anything that's mind altering, the powers that be, the archons, are going to try to weaponize it. And then, of course, everything that's bright casts a shadow. I mean, we all here are proponents for LSD and entheogens, but there's a dark side, right, Jack? Some people get addicted, some people abuse it, and some people use it to hurt others.
Well, and it is true, and living in the material world, light is, we all are, dancing in the light, but we, at the same time, we're casting the shadow.
Exactly.
And so that's, that's part of, the idea of coming to grips, or to utilize Jungian psychology to participate in individuation and, becoming whole from the light and the darkness.
Well said. And when was the first time you actually heard of Gnosticism proper?
So, I guess I would blame comic books. I guess I'd cast the blame on comic books because when I was a kid growing up, I was a big avid reader of comic books. And as I grew into my adolescence, I came across this obscure magazine. And I think it might have been a family member might have gotten me a subscription to it, but it was a magazine called Man, Myth, and Magic.
Oh.
And that's when I first started tapping into that. But, interestingly, I recall from, I don't know how long ago it was, but I remember an interview that I heard on the radio with R. Crumb. I'm sure you guys are familiar with R. Crumb, the old underground comic.
Oh, yeah.
And they were asking him about his work, but at some point they asked, the interviewer asked him what his influences were. And he said, well, I guess I'd have to describe myself as a Gnostic. And then he kind of launched on that. And, one thing led to another.
When was that? A long time ago? Because I know his latest book, or the book he did where he he depicted the Bible, I believe the Old Testament, and he did and he said I am a Gnostic. Is this even before this?
Yeah, this was before that came
Wow.
out, the Old Testament, which was a pretty interesting work in and of itself. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I own a copy. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Of course you do. But that was a while back. It was an interview. I can't even place a decade now, but it was a while back. I ran across Gnostic thought and just of course the researching the Dead Sea Scrolls, and as that information came out, that was very intriguing stuff, and I picked that up at an early age.
Very cool. And of course, Crumb did his famous presentation of Philip K. Dick and the Pink Beams, so he must have known. I mean, obviously, you can't separate that event with Gnosticism. So, and it's a classic and still very popular, comic strip, if you would. And hey, Vance, I always wanted to ask you, when was the first time you ever heard about the Gnostics? I'm sure it wasn't aeon by years ago.
No, actually in the 80s. And I had very little idea of it. I think my first conception of Gnostics are people didn't want to reproduce any more people on the earth, so because we were giving more people to the demiurge. But it was about the same time that I was reading the Bible for the first time, and I noticed in Genesis that the Yaldi was lying. So it was in the 80s. Definitely did, but I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but I was aware of it because I remember I'm seeing in my mind my old apartment in Sunnyvale, California, and I remember being in my car and thinking about the Gnostics. Yeah, well, it was right north of 280. And in Sunnyvale, a little apartment there.
It's funny for me also, as I think about it, I think my first introduction to modern neo-Gnosticism had to have been the Principia Discordia. And we talked just briefly about that a little earlier, Miguel. But, then when they really brought in the whole Gnostic thought as a punchline, which really resonated with me.
Oh, wow. Tell us more about this. Yeah, we'd want to hear more because.
So in my mind, the Principia, as you guys I'm sure are aware, the Principia Discordia was the gospel, if you will, of Discordianism that was written back by Gregory Hill, I think it was, and Thornley, a guy named Thornley. But they were, of course, visited back in the early 60s. They were visited by a etheric chimpanzee who shared with them the mysteries of Discordianism, and as rumor has it, at the end of before disapparating, he rolled them a golden apple. And I wasn't sure if it was a golden delicious or an honest to God gold apple, but and that led them to the goddess Eris and Discordianism, and they wrote the Principia Discordia, and the rest is history.
Yes, it's definitely a very powerful revelation, and we want to get to this, but definitely the theme of the ape and the chimpanzee goes through your books from many thinkers and many ideas. For some reason, I've had a sync lately with the Planet of the Apes. It just keeps appearing. That in Atlantis, and maybe it's me projecting, or it's a sync about the state of this country. We're either heading into the Planet of the Apes future or Atlantis future, so it doesn't look good either way. But damn dirty apes. Get your paws off me.
Of course, that movie came out the same year as 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Really? I didn't know
that was the big dichotomy. That was the big, AI future versus the de-evolution of the Planet of the Apes. So it was quite the watershed year for science fiction movies.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, both are classic movies, and definitely consciousness expanding, and as we're talking about, still part of our culture even today, and still very relevant to today. So Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love this culture stuff. There's so much to it, and it's a wonderful labyrinth, and that's I have to remind myself of this. But Jack, tell us about getting more or less to the main event or the main theme. Tell us about the Tek Gnostic path and why it is Gnostic. Or maybe you want to start, how did you come to it to say this is Tek Gnostic? This is a system I can put together.
Right. Well, so, I'd use the term Tek Gnostics, with the hyphenated tech, two-part Tek Gnostics, as a metaphor to describe a system that is a balance of artifact and epiphany. And so the tech component, of course, is the manipulation of tools or artifacts, and then the Gnostic component to the compound word is the knowledge, the intuitively derived knowledge. So, Tek Gnostics, for me, it kind of was spawned from the do-it-yourself cyberpunk ethos of the 90s, and it kind of was that expression that was kind of co-occurring with the armchair shamanism of the human potential movement. So again, the tech component of the term was inspired by the rise of the new technologies or artifacts that we were seeing coming out of the information age. And the Gnostics half of the term, of course, comes from the biblical era heretics, from the Dead Sea. But if you're asking me why Gnostics with an S, because there's kind of a component to that it's interesting. I landed on the word Gnostics versus Gnostic.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely enough, through a guy named L. Ron Hubbard. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his work.
Oh no, I never heard of him. No,
right? So he back in the early. I mean, he was like one of the first guys back in '61 or '62. Might have been earlier. Might have been late '50s. But he wrote that book Dianetics.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so Hubbard was originally a science fiction writer. He had created Dianetics as a technology of human potential. Like, he was one of the first guys to kind of go into that realm, and it was really one of the first self-help. He was one of the first self-help gurus from the early '60s, and he described the book Dianetics as a mix of Western technology and Oriental philosophy. Now, although I'm not really a big fan of the Church of Scientology, in those days I was really intrigued by his approach and his use of the word Dianetics with an S.
Mm-hmm.
So, part of my vision of Tek Gnostics was to create a techno-shamanic field guide. And unlike Hubbard, my vision was driven and was first and foremost perceived as a parody or a prank, in the fine tradition of Discordianism, a la the Principia Discordia. So Tek Gnostics was originally kind of a pun on Dianetics, as as a humorous take on the human potential movement.
Yeah, very cool. And as you write, you could say in a very compressed way, the Tek Gnostics path is really consciousness hacking, isn't it? And really, that's what L. Ron Hubbard was doing at the beginning before the
uniforms.
Exactly. Yeah, he was doing these sort of a mixture of technology and shamanism to help people with their problems. I mean, I've heard on the lower level, Scientology can be very helpful for consciousness hacking.
Exactly. And we can talk more about that. And but that is correct. And that was kind of the whole idea that. And again, for my time coming out of more of the 80s, 90s, the whole explosion of desktop publishing and the computer revolution and the rise of the science fictional cyberpunk genre really kind of drove that my interest in not only the digital media or the tech component, but also the Gnostic component, or the more etheric, revealed information, if you will.
So in the 90s, so you must have enjoyed all these, I think cyberpunk is very Gnostic at its core, but in the 90s, there were certainly a lot of very cool Gnostic movies, like obviously The Matrix, Dark City, Existence, Gattaca, Truman Show. So you must have enjoyed all these very cool Gnostic movies in the 90s.
Right. And, and that really informed, not only myself, but a lot of us, informed our understanding of, neo-Gnosticism or new Gnosticism. And, of course, starting with Blade Runner, which, as we all know, is brilliantly rendered work from Philip K. Dick. It was, they're still trying to equal that in terms of cinematic representation.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. It still stands the test of time. Jack, why do you see Gnosticism as the most applicable spiritual response to the times we live in?
Well, that's a good question, but having recently fallen in with a shady bunch of characters who call themselves synchromystics.
Oh yeah.
I too kind of subscribe to the notion that we are living in Gnostic times. And we've just I've heard you have that discussion with some of my fellow synchromystics on your show. My approach to Gnosticism is an aggregated one. I'm drawing from many traditions, both new and old. But I think the central Gnostic myth of a deranged, jealous, trickster god is an elegant spiritual response to the times we were living in.
Yeah, I would obviously I agree from past shows, but something else you do mention, and I should mention more often, is that Gnosticism, since it's an heir of Plato and Pythagoras, is definitely about expressing through myth. And I'm sure you find that very useful and very, very useful and very important.
It is really useful to perceive our hypothesis as a mythology. And one of the things that I've really appreciated actually about your show, Miguel, is you've always touched on that in your intros about, creating your own myth, and walking your own path. And that's really important because it allows for a broader platform from which to explore.
Definitely. And when you see the world through myth, it makes, it's not even more bearable, but it's more enlightening and you can get more detached. For example, I'm sure you agree, instead of seeing somebody like Trump or other people from the government, if you see them as archetypal images and symbols, it's a lot easier to navigate. And of course, Jack, that's what the synchromystic movement does anyway, right? Right.
Perceiving, the mystical in mundane existence. And that's true. And especially in looking at archetypical activity in individuals, it helps to broaden an understanding of why certain things are occurring at this time, and so if it turns out that we look at our sitting president as a trickster character, it kind of adds a real dynamic to some of his actions and our response to them.
Exactly. And that's for anybody. I mean, as Jung said, all complexes have an archetypal core. The ego is a complex. So we all have that within us and we can understand what's driving us, what's being projected out into reality from the collective unconscious. So it makes it a lot more bearable and easier to, I don't know about easier to understand, but easier to accept.
Yeah, and I would add to that it creates more facets of receptivity.
Mm-hmm.
It allows, it gives you just more angles from which to judge what it is you're taking in.
Exactly. And speaking of Jung, and I'm quoting Laura London's wonderful podcast, but speaking of Jung, you write a lot in all three of your books, the Tek Gnostics Trilogy, that synchronicities are key for the Technostics. Why is that?
I think Jung's brilliance was in his identification and description of synchronicity. I mean, he did a lot of great work with Jungian psychology and depth psychology, but I think that Jung successfully modernized a very ancient phenomena. He argued that synchronicity is acausal, in that it's not affected by the space-time continuum. We all experience synchronicity. The modern logos of synchronicity is typified as the 11:11 transmission, or the 11 past 11 cosmic trigger, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And tapping into or paying attention to that trigger facilitates more frequent experiences of synchronicity. It's kind of a self-feeding cycle. And as I wrote in the Heresies, Jung's synchronicity is not merely a term used to describe meaningful coincidence. It is also a communicative mode, a conduit or a medium whereby the interconnectedness of all things, separated as they are in space and time, where that interconnectedness occurs. This is the meaningful coincidence that informs the esotericism that I try to apply in Technostics.
Indeed, and I like how you wrote that even the I Ching is a form of synchronicity, according to Jung.
Absolutely, it is the I Ching is a brilliant device that allows the operator's ability to just focus on the exact moment when the query is put to essentially the ancient binary computer known as the I Ching.
Yeah, I've been doing the I Ching every morning, and it's not easy, Jack, because my ego really wants to rebel against it. I don't know if you've had that. Yeah, I can feel it pushing against it, and I can feel this ideas and symbols coming through. It's any sort of enlightenment, you're going to get a rebellion from your ego, right? That's what it's there for, just to manage reality and nothing else.
The monkey mind.
Yeah, exactly, the monkey mind. And you say that the Technostics path, and I love this, you say it's a conceptual chameleon. Tell the audience more about that.
Well, it serves for me, right? This is my own little science project, but or art project, depending on how you look at it. But it serves many functions, and so for me, Technosticism is just a reminder of the great duality that we were born into. We were born into this world, and we'll probably die out of it. But while we're here, we're in that dichotomy, that application versus rest, the great dualism. And so for me, Technostics represents that, but I also look at it as a consciousness hacking tool or manual, which is I've tried to put that out as a means of facilitating autonomy, and especially in this day and age, personal autonomy is an important and even at the risk of ego, it's an important perceptive filter from which to judge how crazy is this high weirdness that we're experiencing getting for us all,
Yes, it's a lot. What did Jeff Kripal say? When people share their experiences, it's probably even weirder. And as you said, reality is definitely stranger than than fiction. And well, Vance, do you have any questions for Jack?
Yeah, Jack, I was wondering, what's your conception of Gnosis? I mean, how do you think of it, and how does it, fold into, the technosticks?
So, I think that, for me, Gnosis is revealed knowledge or intuitively derived knowledge. And it's kind of the synchronistic payoff of our perceptive existence. And so when we are given those flashes of insight, and oftentimes they're driven really by our own personal understanding of the world we live in, unique to us. When we get those flashes of insight, that is, in my mind, the essence of Gnosis. Again, intuitively derived knowledge.
Yeah, very good. Also, do you think there's also a two-way communication element to that? I mean, Gnosis would be kind of coming to us, and is there a way that we can communicate back, even, maybe in their world, synchronicities? Maybe they see 11:11 on their clocks or something.
Wait a minute, on their clock it's 11 before 11.
They run backwards like counterclockwise.
I think it always is a two-way flow, and in the Gnostic metaphor, I think that our intuitively derived knowledge is that intimate relationship with, as Miguel Ajú so eloquently put it, the God above gods. And so I think that two-way flow is there, and I think that we, part of our job is interpretation, and how that interpretation looks in the three-dimensional world.
I would say so too.
Yeah, we can't do anything else but interpret things, really. It's all relative to our understanding, our knowledge, our perceptual mechanisms, and so forth.
Right.
Human beings perceive reality through our minds, not through our bodies like other animals. So,
the reality tunnel, right?
Yeah, exactly. Bingo. And I must say that, the God above God is not mine. That's actually Paul Tillich. He's an Orthodox theologian. And he said it, I don't know about snidely, but he was talking about Gnosticism and how they posited a God above God, I think. Well, you go to the Gnostic text, they might say God beyond God or the alien God, but it definitely works. And I was just talking about doing the I Ching in the morning, being more involved in it as my sort of conduit to my unconscious and conduit to or synchromistic tool to my outside world, and how to interpret it as it interacts with my monkey brain, as we were talking about. And so, but I obviously have not, beyond the fridge magnet spirituality and reading the books here and there years ago, I haven't really delved deep into Taoism. But you have, Jack. So would you say Taoism has Gnostic qualities?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have, since an early age, been really inspired by Taoism. And I would argue that, in fact, and actually, in book 3 of my trilogy, the Tek Gnostics Codex, I make the outrageous and libelous assertion that Taoism directly influenced Gnostic thought. And my suspicion is that Taoist thought migrated west from ancient Asia to the Near East, where it was incorporated into, biblical era Essene and other mystery traditions. I can't prove that in a court of law, but that's my suspicion.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we know there were Buddhist monks in 300 BC in Alexandria sent by King Osaka, who was evangelizing Buddhism across the world. So for example, what are some parallels that you would say with Taoism and Gnosticism, Jack?
I think that the I think that the essential dichotomy of experience is demonstrated both in Taoism, and in other Eastern thought, but the yin yang, the classic Taoism symbol of dualism. I think that is echoed in Gnosticism in many ways, but I think that in one facet, it drives the whole dichotomy between the Gnostic aesthetic and the God above gods, that dualism.
So there's always an interplay between light and darkness, you see. And I mean, even in Gnosticism, it's not as dualist as most people say. You're supposed to hold both the light and the darkness together in front of you and see it as a whole. Is that what Taoism does too? Well,
absolutely. And in the Taoist yin yang symbol, of course, is in the core of the dark half of the symbol is the shard of white, and in the middle of the white half of the symbol is the little splinter of darkness, the little dot. So those two absolutely dance.
Very, very cool. Also, in your book, Applied Technostics, you talk about there is a difference between a psychonaut, an intelligence engineer, and a technostic. All three cool concepts. Explain to the audience what they mean.
Well, so a psychonaut. I mean, I've took this, is from the classic description. A psychonaut is a sailor of the mind, which is kind of the ancient Greek root of the word psychonaut, right? So to be a psychonaut is to be a sailor of the mind. Now, I realize that this term is often associated with entheogenic use, but, especially in my mind, there are other yogic methods that are more accessible and less controversial in terms of pursuing the psychonautic path. Now, an intelligence engineer, the way I describe it, is a sailor of the mind who actively seeks to define, to refine, and to self-program her psychonautic experience. This would be in keeping with the pioneering psychonauts such as John Lilly and his metaprogramming metaphor. And so a technostic is one who, in their intelligence engineering, seeks to the balance of artifact and epiphany, as I mentioned earlier. That's that approaches the whole consciousness hacking concept with intent, adding the balance, adding the intent or the will, and balancing that with the moment of repose or the silence in as the balancing half of the contemplation. I would also add, rather self-servingly, that a technostic is someone who's been exposed to the mind virus of my books.
Like the plasmate of Philip K. Dick, huh? When he said the Nag Hammadi library was sort of a virus, raw information that got released into the world. So yours would be the same too. In a more parody sense, Yeah, that is true. Although you never know what Dick was, how serious he was. I mean, he did like to do that shuck and jive. He was always a typical person who would say something offensive and then say, "Man, I'm just joking." So he might have been doing that in his writing at times. You never know. He was a trickster. Well, let's talk about some Philip K. Dick. Tell us about when you first encountered Phil and what was his impact on your work.
Right. It's funny. I'll talk about myself in my younger age when I first ran into Dick, but it's interesting that before, you were talking earlier about Hollywood, and before Hollywood got sucked into totally only doing super comic book stories, epics, they went through a phase of almost exclusively doing Philip K. Dick movies. I mean, so Dick has inspired, the Western world ever since Blade Runner came out, and a ton of other book, what was one Arnold Schwarzenegger did?
Total Recall.
Total Recall. Thank you. There's a ton of the movies that came out, but for me, I digress a little bit. So for me, when I was introduced to Philip K. Dick, I had this great high school English teacher. He was also my soccer coach, and he taught a course at the high school I attended that he called Science Fiction as a Cautionary Tale, and that is where I was first introduced to Philip K. Dick. We went through some of the classics like the Martian Chronicles and remember the short story The Sentinel, which became 2001. But that's where I first came across his work. And I was drawn to the psychological twists in his writing. And one of the things that I really liked about Philip K. Dick was his actually, I think it was pretty pioneering. I think he pioneered the whole concept of alt reality or alternative realities in his writing, such as The Man in the High Castle, where Nazi Germany wins the war. That metaphor kind of came back to bite us too, but Philip K. Dick's impact was, for me, it was driven by his later Gnostic narratives, like in Valis as the classic example, and his shocking realization that the empire never ended. And there were certain things that came out of his work that have really resonated and proliferated in our modern culture. This concept of a pervasive archonic power structure in the ancient Greek sense of the word archon, it most accurately defines the parapolitical world we're living in today.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, we've talked a lot about Philip K. Dick on the show, and you mention him a lot. Do you have a favorite book from Dick, or favorite 2 or 3 books?
Of course, the Valis books. I think The Man in the High Castle was good. Some of his shorts, some of his collected works I really enjoyed. But I think that he was probably more influential to me when he, again, in his later life, when he was really grappling with where his science fiction was bleeding into his real world, his perceived world, and the way he grappled with that, and then he put out that completely insane exegesis. That's I'm sure you've read it, Miguel.
If it's possible to read it, I think you experience it. It's such a monster, and I'm like,
I haven't made it all the way through it, but I kind of use it like the I Ching, where I'll open to a random page.
That's the best way to do it. It really is the I Ching of the future or the present, because every time you open it, it just blows your mind.
Yeah,
what his mind was going through, and I think you are dealing in your works, your 3 books, about technology and how we have to deal with it and make it work for us, and the same thing with entheogens, because if we don't, like you say, the archons are going to use the pharmaceuticals and technology to really suppress us. And I know science fiction usually started with how technology was positive and create a utopia and so forth, and Cyberpunk and Philip K. Dick too sort of switched that and said, no, it's neutral at best, and it might even be evil at worst, and depends who has their hands on it that will win the day. And technology isn't even about human advancement, but is about reality manipulation. And Dick was definitely the master of that. And again, here we are on 2020, and more relevant than ever, I would say. But I'd like to bring you in, Vance. You've been reading a lot of Dick lately. And I've sort of asked you, well, do you see Dick as more relevant today, or what insights have you had recently with your voyage into Dick's mind?
Well, a lot of what I've read more recently is some of the lesser known works. And boy, was he into the nuclear holocaust the post-apocalyptic kind of thing. So many of his short stories were about that. But I think it's relevant to not necessarily, things like The Man in the High Castle and the archonic things and Ferris Fremont and Radio Free Albemuth, as the kind of representative of the archonic government. That's definitely relevant. I see in Dick is more, what I see shining through is his journey spiritually. His 2374 experience, that comes out in a lot of the later knowledge, such as Valis. RFA, of course, was pretty much just a recount of the whole thing. So that's about. I don't think he imagined some of this. Of course, artificial intelligence. He had robots all over the place. So from that standpoint, yeah, how could I forget that? That is very relevant today because we still haven't gotten to the point where we're going to have to deal with some of the issues that he brings up with mankind's relationship to, artificial creatures, so to speak. So, yeah, from those standpoints, a lot of stuff is dated, a lot of technology dated. I love it when he talks about the robot spools, but he's very creative. Kind of, how Star Trek kind of got away from trying to be too hokey with future technology by just kind of being vague. Well, Philip K. Dick, he invented terms for things that weren't familiar, weren't part of current technology of the 60s and 70s, that were foreign. So it let your imagination run wild, and it didn't predict what we have now, which all this digital solid state stuff. But
right. Well, you remember Vance, that in the appendix of Valis, which itself is a pretty mind bending concept of vast alien
living systems and organs,
intelligence system.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That's wild. But in the appendix, of course, he did the truncated exegesis, and that's where I first came across the concept of the empire never ended. It's like, wow.
Yeah, that was just part of his experience, because he had an experience where he had kind of woke up and he was in that era.
Right. He had the time slip.
Right. So Martian time slip. That was another one of his that I read. They're all blending together. I've read too many at once. I think I must have read 20 of his books in the last 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're not having like dreams or experiences?
Oh, I wish, but no. A couple I've read again, like Ubik. I read that again. The Valis Trilogy I read again. It's like reading a different book, the second time around.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it is indeed. And here's another question for you, Vance, because I was thinking Dick obviously suffered a lot with mental issues, perhaps drugs, relationships problems, and you could say he was very tormented through most of his life, but towards the end of his life, he came to peace. It's almost like that Gnostic experience he had to go through, that hell, once you see the world for what it is, he found the serenity. And even people like Tessa Dick and friends say he was at peace towards the end. And suddenly, oh my God, they're making a big Hollywood movie over one of my stories. Ridley Scott invited him to watch some of the screenings. Life was good. And then, well, it seems like the archons weren't going to have it, right? He had to go. But I always wonder if it's a pity that Dick didn't write, that if he'd lived, he probably would have written a lot of insights on how to heal the mind, how to be better, and all that during the mid-'80s. Have you ever wondered about that? That he might have been like here's 12 steps to get your shit together after you've had a Gnostic experience. You know what I mean? This is how I did it. This is how I found peace.
My idea, and maybe I just don't have enough information, is that he never really did solve the mystery that he was trying to unravel, that's evident in the exegesis. I mean, he was at peace. He had more of a material world success toward the end, obviously, because he was poor most of his life, but I don't think he had so many different variations on, who Valis was, Zebra, all sorts of things, but there was a core to it. And I don't think he was the kind of person to actually become the guru. He kind of made fun of gurus. He made fun of Alan Watson. Well, not really made fun of him. He had Alan Watson in one of his novels. Yeah, it was who was it? He was on the houseboat. And it was about Marin County. I can't remember titles of the stories, but something Shade Tree or somebody. Yeah, the main female protagonist. It's gosh, now I can't bring up the title, but yeah, he had Alan Watson there, and I don't think he was a big fan of gurus. To tell you the truth, he's Gnostic.
And Vance, you may recall that in the opening pages of Valis, Philip K. Dick does reference the Grateful Dead.
No, I didn't catch that. Really?
Yeah, he references the Grateful Dead, and he's talking about the girlfriend in Valis is talking about the song Casey Jones that was popular when he wrote that book.
Oh, okay. Didn't catch that.
Yeah, well,
shame on me.
Yeah, I'll have to go
that
back
was
and
Lindsay Ronstadt, right? The whatchamacallit, the Fox. She was, I think, actually Linda Ronstadt.
Oh.
And David Bowie was in there too as
right.
Yeah, in Valis.
Yeah, he plays God, what was it? To go see the movie The Man Who Fell from Earth. That's a sort of a spoof movie in Valis.
Yeah, one of my old favorites from when I was younger.
Yes, so much importance. And do you have anything else you want to say about Dick, Jack, or do you want to switch roles and be my sidekick and grill Vance for a few minutes?
I'm well done already.
Altered realities, everything's switching.
Vance is, you're kind of the go-to on Philip K. Dick. You've been revisiting all his works. Is there any one particular psycho device that popped out at you in the rereading of some of his works?
Psycho device in terms of what do you mean by psycho device?
Well, he was. I always enjoyed the way he always had real, the psychological twisters in his books. I don't know if I want to describe it any more succinctly, but just was there anything that really jumped out at you that?
Like in Ubik, where we were talking about the beginning, the dead, Grateful Dead, and Ubik, the dead are really alive and the alive are really dead. It's like that.
Yeah. One thing, in Valis, I love how he splits himself up into two people.
Oh, right.
That is just far out. I mean,
horse lover fat.
Yep. That has to be, and he did the same thing in Radio Free Albemuth because it was autobiographical, obviously, but Nick and Phil, of course, Phil was himself and Nick was himself. So he split himself up into the mundane, same thing as in Valis, in the mundane, logical guy and the mystical guy. He split those two up. That's my favorite device that he used.
Yeah, he definitely does that a lot. The duality of man, the higher and the lower self, and how reality is split. I mean, it's
three stigmata it go weird, because that Palmer Eldridge winds up at the end. I hope this isn't a spoiler. Winds up like poking into everybody's reality. He might up multiplying himself. So I'm not sure if Palmer Eldritch was evil or good at this point, or neither, you know. But the first time I read it, I thought he was good. But the second time through, I kind of saw him as kind of pervasively evil, intrusive, you know, poking his head into everybody's reality. But maybe Phil's trying to say, you know, the grand consciousness actually is part of us all, you know.
Well, yeah, and definitely in A Scanner Darkly, you have the main character whose brain is destroyed. His consciousness basically split because of the drugs, right?
That's right.
He's two people.
Right. Yep. So, and they took advantage of him.
As we get to the end, Jack, do you have an online presence, or would you like to tell the audience where to find out more about you?
Well, absolutely. I appreciate that opportunity. So the trilogy, the 3 books, the Tek Gnostics Heresies, the Applied Technostics, and the Technostics Codex, they're available on Amazon and iBooks, etc., those sites. I also do signed copies that I sell directly on my website, and the web address is www.technosticks.com. So that site is like it's my mothership. That's where it houses all my databases and, you know, archives, and it also is the portal to the premium website where I do a membership site, and then there are, you know, there's access to some premium features there. I can also be found at technosticks.blogspot.com, and that's my weblog. That's where I, you know, I do probably 2 or 3 installments a month on the blog site, and that also I have links there also to my YouTube channel and the Instagram portals. So yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. And audience, definitely check it out and check out his books. This is Gnosticism for Modern Times, and this is necessary as technology, the American archons, the pharmaceuticals are coming for us, so we better fight back. The aeons better bite back, as I sometimes like to say. So good Gnosis. But first of all, Vance, thanks for coming and keeping us company as always.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, huh? PKD, RAW, and everybody else. What more could you want?
Well, Jack, really appreciate you coming on Aeon Byte. Really enjoyed talking to you, and good luck with your books and your continued journey into hacking consciousness.
Well, I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. The first part of our interview with Jack Hart on his Tek Gnostics books. The High Weirdness only continues. In our second part, Jack discusses more about Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary, and this includes a useful 8-circuit model that is terrific for consciousness hacking. Jack will share applied technostics, exercises which are also really terrific for consciousness hacking. We'll get into the prophecies of Marshall McLuhan and go into some extraterrestrial topics like Foo Fighters, cargo cults, and UFOs in general, and much more. As a bonus for patrons at Patreon and AB Prime members, I will include part of our interview with Eric Davis from a couple of years ago on his book, High Weirdness, where he speaks about Dick's divine madness and prophetic genius. So become an AB Prime member or patron at Patreon for the full Pink Pink Valis delight. Only $6.99 a lunar cycle, or whatever you want to pledge on Patreon. You won't find this Gnostic and Hermetic content or many of our guests anywhere in cyberspace or meat space. When you subscribe, it will cost you about $1 per episode, and that's a deal of many lifetimes. Membership includes full access to the archives with more than 500 episodes, 14 years of quality interviews. You'll also get an invitation to the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group and the Discord channel, where many past guests hang out there, and I'm always there to answer your questions. Even support in the form of some shekels to PayPal or the US mail really helps. Don't forget I'm offering voiceover services if you need some audio for your projects. I also have the merch store and an Amazon wish list, as I always need equipment in this universe of entropy. Finding Hermes is alive, and so are our virtual Alexandria exclusive private meetings. That includes spiritual and mental exercises loyal to the ancient Gnostics, and a whole lot of stimulating conversation on many heretical topics and a Q&A. I've already given lessons on Gnostic chants, vowel magic, astral ascents, mystical Eucharist, and much more. You can do so many wonders. I just know it. I just know it. And together we are the true song of the counterculture, always saying yes to the divine. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real.